Hello, everybody. Welcome to B3. We are thrilled to be hosting a chat with Terry Gilliam. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I am so happy to be the moderator today. Terry doesn't really need an introduction, but I'm going to just give us a short reminder of some of the amazing work he's done. Not all of it, but he's been an actor, a comedian, a director, a producer, a screenwriter, and an animator. That makes me feel lazy. He has also worked not just in film, but for the stage and for opera. His films have included, of course, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Time Bandits, The Meaning of Life, Brazil, The Fisher King, 12 Monkeys, which a lot of people have been talking about in 2020 again, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, The Brothers Grimm, Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus, Zero Theorem, and The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. My goodness, and I didn't even mention everything you've done, but what an amazing career. We're so thrilled that you can join us. Not personally in Frankfurt, of course. You are at home in North London safely. We're glad you're safe. But yeah, we wanted to start talking a little bit about your storytelling and storytelling in general, which is a nice thing to talk about anytime, I think. So I guess to kick off, how do you know if a story is not just a good story, but it's a good story for you?
That's very easy because I never know whether it's a good story, but I know what intrigues me, what obsesses me, what captures me. That's all. It's a very selfish world I live in. If I want it and I like it, I try to do it. It's as simple as that. And the fact that I've gotten away apparently entertaining a lot of people over the years is just one of those flukes of nature.
Okay. What I love about some of the stories you've told is you can tackle some quite serious, big issues on a human scale or on sort of a society level, but you can do that in such a fun and fantastical or entertaining way. So is that just how you think about the world, as sort of serious topics, but making them exciting?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose my structure of the world that is a result of Grimm's fairy tales. I mean, I grew up with them. I listened to them on the radio. They became a form to understand the world, and I've never grown out of that. I mean, then I suppose it's what we become as we grow older. So I love Grimm's fairy tales. I was raised in the countryside, so nature was very important. When it came to going to school and college, I ended up as a political science major. So from being isolated in nature, away from civilization, I slowly was civilized. And as I got deeper into civilization and discovered in political science the way the world works, at least on a political nature, I became more and more obsessed with society and the way it functions or dysfunctions and the way it's controlled or not. And so all of that is incorporated in the films I make. Everything I make is a political statement, I suppose. I remember moving to England, I kept saying that my films were messages in bottles back to America, because America has always, it's the leading nation in the planet, so we cannot ignore it. And what happens there does not stay in America, unfortunately. It tends to spread. So most of my stuff is about that. I mean, living in England, I became more obsessed during the Thatcher years, and also with the success of Python. Here was a chance to be funny about the world, to talk about serious things without being pedantic or preaching. You could make jokes about them, and often that was more successful in making people think. On the other hand, humor is another way of just taking people's anger about what's wrong in society away, which humor in many ways is very dangerous. We can distract people very easily from the real problems of the world. Anyway, I've never solved these problems. I just kind of mix them, and each thing I do is a new confection that I've thrown together with all the contradictions, confusions, unexplained things, dreams. I try to put in there somehow and make it at least understandable to an audience, and hopefully it will affect them in some way.
I think you're succeeding in that. And not just humor, but also I'm so loving the fantasy in some of your films. And I think as adults, children have these amazing, fantastical thoughts. And then as adults, we try to maybe squash those down or don't think like that. I mean, do you still think in terms of having fantastical thoughts yourself?
Yes and no, because on one hand, I'm a realist. I'm not really a fantasist. I'm very aware of the world. I just try to escape it as often as possible. And fantasy has always been a more interesting way of perceiving the world we live in. I mean, we live in this very mechanistic, everything is down to facts, figures, numbers. This doesn't explain anything. In fact, one of my favorite lines, The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, is Quixote saying to Toby, explain things? You think explaining explains anything? It doesn't often. I mean, it's a way of just obfuscating what is really going on. I love science because science really looks and tries to understand. Once we have some facts in our hands, politicians, the media love using it for their own purposes, not your purpose. And I think fantasy, or being a child in your mentality, is one way to survive. I think I keep that childlike sense of wonder alive in me because it makes life bearable. Most of life is really painful for the majority of people. It's difficult. And I hate the fact that everything conspires to say, grow up, stop dreaming, stop being a child, become an adult. And so I spend my time resisting that as much as possible.
And what about, this is such a strange year we're living in. How have you been coping? Have you been feeling creative? Like you said, you're a realist also, and you follow science. There's a lot to deal with that this year, but how are you sort of able to stay positive this year? Have you been able to?
No, I haven't. I failed miserably. I found it very depressing. I find the state of the world. The virus doesn't worry me. I kind of I admire the virus going out there and doing some very useful work in reducing the number of us rampaging around the planet. I think it's done a reasonable job, not as great a job as I would have hoped, but anyway. I find what is interesting about the lockdown and again, I think I'm very privileged in having a large garden, living in North London where Hampstead Heath is only a couple minutes out of the front door. I've got a lot of space to move in, which I did. The thing that struck me interesting is I thought, or always prepared, that when my career failed, I couldn't get money to make films or anything, I would go back to cartooning and drawing and just coming up with silly ideas. And that's one thing I've not been able to do. That's been very depressing, that I find maybe it's just the weight of what I think is going wrong particularly in America and in Britain, is the weight of that on my head is crushing out any desire or even ability to sit down and do some funny little cartoons.
No.
I can only say, after this several months long of being depressed, I finally succeeded yesterday. So your timing is excellent, because the only real cartooning I do these days is birthday cards and Valentine cards for my family. And my daughter's birthday is coming up in a week, and I have been for the last month going crazy because no ideas were coming forward to do a birthday card for. And it was only yesterday that finally I got an idea and I finished the card. So I'm feeling better now than I've felt for the last couple of months.
I'm glad we're talking to you today then. That's really good news.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, have been at home feeling like, oh my gosh, it's the perfect time that I have time to write a screenplay or do this, but you just aren't in the right headspace. And I think it's important for people to remember we're not machines. Just because we have some free time doesn't mean we can do our best work.
Not at all. I mean, I thought that was my rather youthful hope, but it doesn't work out that way.
Have a lot of people been asking you about 12 Monkeys, or have you been thinking about it again?
Well, what I like is the fact the world has been thinking about it. Every day I get a Google alert, and it's always got 12 Monkeys on board. And I think that's wonderful. So I have to thank the virus once again for a rebirth in my career. I mean, 12 Monkeys is really all about it. It was about a virus, the idea that it could wipe out. See, again, 12 Monkeys was much more optimistic than what has happened, because in 12 Monkeys, we wiped out several billion, or the virus did, and not so this time. But it was prophetic in the sense of it isn't the big things that we are spending our time fearing. It's the little things that will get us. And I think that's what's happened again. It's interesting how nature fights back with tiny, tiny things. We're not eaten by saber-toothed tigers anymore or trampled by woolly mammoths. We're worked over pretty roughly by little bacterium and viruses.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, do you look forward to getting back into filmmaking? And, do you have new projects that you're working on that you're ready once lockdown is more over? Or are you being a bit more reflective and taking more time, as you said?
No, that sounds very poetic almost. The fact is, nobody's offering me any money to make movies at the moment. Movies are about money and getting your hands on a chunk of it. I've got scripts. There's one that I wrote back in 1996, I think. Still trying to get it going. Nobody's biting at the moment. There's a project I was supposed to be shooting in September of this year, but the virus paid to that, and nothing is quite recovered. Nobody wants to make the big decision saying, here's a few million for you, Terry, to go and play.
I wish I had a few million. So I'm hoping there'll be a Frankfurt businessman or woman who's got a lot of money they're sitting on that might want to fund Terry's next work. We would love that. Or anybody watching on the internet.
I only want to talk to the 1%, the ones that have got big bucks, not hundreds of thousands. I need millions.
Fantastic. Terry meets the 1%. I like that. And you're mentioning your cartoon drawing, and I wanted to talk to you about animation. Do you plan to do more of that? And why did you start doing that as a way to tell stories? What appeals to you about the animation in a normal time? I know you're sort of not really into it right now.
No. Animation was something I was always interested in. I loved Walt Disney's movies. I think Pinocchio is always on my top 10 list of films. And so animation was always wonderful. And I understood the principles, but I never really got into it until I was on a television show in England. And they had some material they didn't know how to present. And I said, well, let me make an animated film of it. Boom. Now, I had 2 weeks, and I think it was 400 pounds to play with. So the only thing one could do in that time with that little money was start using cutouts. It was easier to just start cutting things out and moving them around in a very crude way. And that was it. And literally overnight, I became an animator just because of that. And because people in England hadn't really seen that style, I think more and more people were interested, and I was offered other work, and that led to Python, and Python led to major success.
And if we can we have to ask you about the Python era, I think. How was it working in that more collective way with these other minds that work in quite different ways to you. What was that an inspiring way to work? Was it ever frustrating that you had all these geniuses together?
No, it was really spectacular and wonderful because there were six of us. Basically, we may not have liked each other half the time, but we all respected each other's talents. And suddenly off we went. And I was, in many ways, the freest of the lot because what I did was different than the others. They were wordsmiths and performers, actors. And I was this guy that cut out silly pictures and moved them around. And so I was the visualist. And I didn't, where the others, we would have our meetings every week. We'd go through all the material that everybody had written or thought about. We'd discuss it, make piles of good, bad, and mediocre. And these things would be shuffled around in hopefully trying to make a show out of it. And basically, very early on, they started getting to a point, because we decided at the beginning that we wanted to work in a stream of consciousness kind of way, get rid of the normal structure of comedy shows, get rid of the punchlines. And so when a sketch would reach a point that it was not working anymore, rather than hanging on for another minute to zing in with a punchline, we would just cut. And basically the others said, all right, Gilliam takes over at this point and gets us to that point. So I had a start and I had a finish. And I was free to do what I wanted in between. And that was wonderful because oftentimes the hardest thing is to begin. But I was privileged to have a beginning and an end, at least thrust upon me, that I had to find a way of working with. And that's what happened. And so in that sense, it was a great learning experience, because the other great thing about it is we'd churn this material out very weekly. So I would have at least one or two all-nighters every week. So I was running on just inbuilt drugs, basically, not the kind you can buy. And I just found being exhausted, it freed my mind. So my mind would float off basically into dream world. I would be in the middle of the night at 3:30 in the morning, finding that the pieces of paper that I'd cut out, the images, started moving around and arranging themselves in stories. And so the work got easier because just my exhausted imagination was just playing.
I like that a tired mind could throw up some of these ideas.
It works. I mean, at least it works for me. I think, again, I find my most creative moments are usually lying in bed in the morning, half awake, half asleep, because my mind hasn't my mind has been ignoring all the sensory apparatus that's still not quite working that time in the morning. And the mind still has got a lot more room to play. During the day, of course, we're distracted by all the things we've got to do. The just amount of sensory material that you're dealing with. You're touching, you're smelling, you're hearing, you're seeing, and you're feeling all this stuff. And it distracts your mind, because your mind is happiest, I think, when it's asleep, when you and all of your sensory apparatus are asleep at night, and the mind just gets to romp around in your brain for several hours without you controlling it. And so by being up all night working, that frees the brain. It frees it by just making it tired and switches off all the sensory apparatus. You don't feel anything.
So do you have a great notebook on the bedside table that you sketch or write down things in a hurry when you wake up fully?
I used to do that quite a bit. I got pretty good at writing in the dark without actually seeing my writing. And dreams, I would write things down. I haven't done that for years, though, because most of the ideas come, I don't know what it is. Maybe I can get lost in things. I'll go look at a flower and I can just disappear into it. The trick always, for me, is to disappear myself. I don't want myself interfering with the process. I just want to step out and see what comes to me. I just farm what's out there.
Fabulous. And with the pythons, will we see any more work with the surviving pythons, or what?
No,
And I guess you can't tour right now, that's for sure.
yeah. I mean, Python was a very precise chemistry. It took the six of us to really make it work. You remove two of the elements, and the others don't quite work the same way. We've all gotten older. Some have gotten incredibly greedy. Some have lifestyles that need support. Others are just tired and worn out. It goes on.
I won't ask about who is who. I was curious if you would ever explore any new formats to work at, like VR, virtual reality. Would that ever interest you? I would love to see inside a Terry Gilliam, to walk around one of your fantasy landscapes.
Several years ago, there was a lot of pressure on me to move into VR. I got Sony, a lot of other people were saying, come and play with us. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. But what I resist is the fact it's a single person experience. That's why I love movies and more than television. Movies have always been to me so important because they're about a group of people going into a big dark space and all agreeing to listen to the story and watch the story that's being presented. And it's a communal experience. And VR is the opposite of that. And that really bothers me. So it's always held me back from leaping in.
Okay. What about sort of web series or sort of shorter bursts of content? Obviously, you've probably done some of that in the past. Short film.
Yeah, that's where we began.
Yeah.
I'm finding there's more interesting work being done on Netflix than in the cinema these days. Basically, because there's a lot of money there, there's a lot of freedom, and a lot of filmmakers who would prefer to be working on a big screen are going there because the money's there, and and you could do it. There's a couple things we're playing around with. During the lockdown, for the first time, I sat and watched a lot of Netflix because I don't watch television much, and so Netflix, I'm finding really good things. But what I've noticed is so many of the shows are very slow. They've got you as a captive audience lying on your couch, and they realize that the material they've got is probably only good for about 30 minutes, but they have to stretch it out to 50. And so we're lulled into this really long-winded, dulling experience that I'll name a series that made me crazy, but it's called Bloodlines. And it's Sissy Spacek and Sam Shepard and Ben Mendelsohn. And it was like that. It was very slow. The actors were very good, but it was slow. And we sat through 3 series wanting to know how it was going to pay off in the end, and getting more and more bored, but doing it because we had become this weird kind of tired, lazy addiction. That's not about being addicted to something that gets you excited. It was just, we have to go through this process to see where the makers are going to take us. And the last 2 episodes of the 3rd series, where it all ended, were terrible. They completely wasted my time. So it's a strange relationship, the way it works with series. I do like the fact that you can stretch things longer, you can develop characters. When they work, they're brilliant. Breaking Bad was brilliant. Ozark is brilliant. There's a few others like that I just think are really well done. They're well written. The actors are good. They're well directed, and I can't fault them. And it's worked for a lot of creative people.
Yeah.
That's the good thing. You don't have to be a big star. You can get a job in these shows. So it's a lot of work for writers, directors, and actors, and that's a good thing.
Good. Well, they're the 1%. We need to hook you up there. I hope that happens, and they'll just throw some money at you and let you get creative. One other thing we wanted to talk about, in addition to storytelling, is the theme of B3 this year is truth. And it's a unique year for truth also. Yeah. So I'm wondering, just, when I say that word, what does that word even mean to you in 2020?
It's very hard to find much of it in the real world. That's all I can say. We're led by Trump, Boris Johnson. Germany's obviously doing a little better, I think. But the two leaders of the English-speaking world are idiots, liars, and it's horrible. And when people, I'm beginning to think slowly we might become like Italy, where Italians for centuries have just gotten bored with the politicians because it's so corrupt and pointless. And they just deal with their families and their immediate worlds. And I begin to think that's what's happening now, because trust has gone, and it's horrible to see happening. In making movies, to me, has always been about being truthful. I may tell a lie, but it may be closer to the truth than the facts. It's like, that's why I like Baron Munchausen. I really felt, here's a man who lies, but his lies are more interesting, number one, and maybe more truthful than what the rest of the world is talking about, the reasonable people, the adults. I think there's many truths, and I find the truths that that are thrust onto us from television and advertising and from politicians are rather pathetic truths. They don't do much for us, but they surround us. That's what's horrible about it. But I don't know if people are really, I don't know if people are just getting very cynical about the world. And that's very sad, because I hope cynicism doesn't take over too much. A certain amount of cynicism is good, but just a drop of it is all one should have.
Yeah, because otherwise I think you give up.
That's what it all leads to.
Yeah.
And I spend a lot of my time giving up, because you start out with all sorts of ideas and ideals and hope and belief in, as an American truth, justice and the American way, all of these things. And as you grow up, you realize you've been fed a pack of lies.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that the ideals were wrong. It's just that they aren't what is happening.
Mm.
And so many people are hiding behind those, quote, truths.
So, it sounds like we know we're living in these strange times. Is there anything still giving you hope?
Nope. That's a simple answer. I don't know. No. As I think I said, my hope is my 4-year-old grandchild. Whether she manages to have a decent life, I have no idea, because I think the world is going to get pretty ugly. I don't see anything turning the momentum that's going on at the moment. We might be able to fix it. I hope so. But that's it. I don't know. Has social media been the thing that finally brings us down besides the virus? Is that we're so, separated. We seem to sit and talk, but we're not really communicating, I don't think. I mean, because being with people is a better way to communicate, because I could sit here and tell you all sorts of lies and get away with it because I'm got my fingers crossed below.
Oh.
I don't know. I really don't know where we're going. I just think, luckily, there's so many really serious people out there working hard, trying to find solutions, whether they are strong enough and numerous enough to overcome, the oil business, all the other businesses that are well established and determined to take as much as they can, as quickly as they can. I don't know.
Can we at least help get through this kind of time with art, with cinema? Can that help us, do you think? Can't fix everything.
I suppose it's what I've always wanted to do, is keep making people think, to look at the absurdities, look at what's going on, because we're so easily controlled. I mean, I have to say, having worked in advertising years ago, when I left America, part of it was because I couldn't tell whether, when I was walking down Venice Beach at sunset with the waves lapping, my girlfriend by my side, whether I was there and feeling it was wonderful and beautiful and romantic because it was, or because I had been told in a toilet paper commercial that it was.
Well, there's still some good in the world out there. And thank you so
Yeah,
much for talking to us today about your storytelling, about truth, about tiny glimmers we can hopefully look at, a 4-year-old's view of the world. Really, thank you for your time today. And any parting words from you?
just learn about funguses. That's the future.
Okay, and give us the name of the book again. You were saying there is a book about fungus that you said is really fascinating.
The book is called End Lives, and it's by Merlin Sheldrake. I recommend it highly.
Wonderful. So, who knew we were going to get a recommendation of a fungus book to close
Yeah,
out our session? But I think it sounds like an interesting way to look at the world.
the last successful fungus book was Fungus the Bogeyman, but that's been some years ago.
Well, you're on. I like that your finger is on this pulse of the fungi. Thank you again so much, Terry, for joining us. We wish you were in Frankfurt in person, but maybe another year. And good luck getting some finance, because we need more Terry Gilliam films, works, episodes in the world. Thank you.